Hi again. So let's go to the second half day of my course. So that's the first day after lunch, and I'll share my mural board, my mural board once again with you on the screen. So what you should see here now is already this swim lane, which is the second half day. So the second half day is pretty much about product backlogs, sprint backlogs, product backlog refinement, product backlog items, everything considering comprising that. So I'll start actually after the lunch break. I always start with a short video. It is a fun video. I really like to watch. It has to do with understanding actually how perception works, how communication works, and so on. So it's really funny. I can recommend to watch that. So I'll start with a little bit of a view on how visions are related to product backlog items. And please don't get confused by epics and user stories in here. I clearly highlight by design and also verbally in the course that this is not part of Scrum. But since so many people work with these terms nowadays in reality, in real life, I use that in my course as well. Also explaining that in Scrum we have in general product backlog items in the product backlog, and they can be of different formats, of course, as well. And that user stories are much more about storytelling and not so much about a format. Yeah. But anyway, this is historical information also a little bit. It just helps if I do this layered view here, this visualization, that people understand that a vision is very high level, that we have then different granularities of requirements, of stories maybe, and so on. So this is really the introduction to that. And from there on, we go right away into one of the, here's a purple sticky again. That means it has to do with the learning. Everything has to do with the learning objectives, but this is the mapping to the learning objectives. It has to do with the product vision. So we do our exercise right away. I'll introduce to them 4 different formats they can use for grading or just working on product visions, like a vision board, like the vision box, like user testimonials, and also elevator pitch, also with the reference where they can find it in books and so on. So the exercise is all about getting creative in small groups. They need to select one or the other product vision template, actually, I've introduced here earlier in the course then, and to create a product vision, based on this template, based on this format they have selected. They can be as creative as they want to, really. And after this exercise, so it's about 30 minutes, usually what I give them for that, sometimes 35. After this, they are asked to present their product vision to the rest of the room. So that means they will get feedback on that. They will get feedback on the presentation if they want it. They get feedback on the product vision itself, what is transported, what it creates in the other participants, like emotions or confusion sometimes, and so on and so on. So we analyze that. And we also figure out how important it really is that a product vision exists, so that it gives people orientation, that it's probably a perfection vision actually sometimes, which will never be reached, but at least it's the orientation and gives the direction in which they need to head to, and that it's also about alignment and so on and so on. So that's what we talk a lot in here, and that's a very, very intense exercise actually. After the exercise, we continue with a little bit of, not just a little bit, with the theory of backlogs, like product backlogs, sprint backlogs, what they are, and so on, how they work. All these elements, all these aspects you could consider like value-based, value, that we have value-driven planning in Agile, that on top of the list, we want the high-value items, the fine-grained ones, on the bottom, the coarse-grained ones. So where the vision of the future is still a little bit blurry, that we don't exactly know maybe how the sequence is, how the ordering in the product backlog is, and so on. We talk about MVPs, MMFs sometimes. We talk about release planning, how that fits into agile planning and in product backlogs and so on. We talk about the vision how it connects to the product backlog, what it has to do with the product backlog items. Also, that the product vision is some kind of filtering mechanism for the product owner then to figure out whether a requirement, an idea should go into the product backlog or not in the end, or it should be considered for the product. Because filtering in that sense means if it has nothing to do with the product vision, then don't do it. Yeah, like going back to the Scrum values, courage to say no sometimes. There's also a video in here you can watch. This is when people start talking about projects and project managers and so on, what my view on that is and why there is no project manager in Scrum and how we get rid of these concepts of projects and project managing and so on as a separate role, as a separate structure, and how all these activities, which are still required, of course, in most endeavors, how they fit into Scrum and who does that and so on. So this is the theory I do in here. Going further also to some exercise, which is which is agile planning, so that they figure out if there's a duration and they have some estimation of these items they have in the backlog, how much how much can go into a release, how much can go into a sprint, and so on and so on. It's a little bit of an exercise. It's explained in here. And I also talk about some statistics, some surveys which have been done, for example, by the Standish Group, and some generalization of that, of course, but just to give participants an idea that not every item comes with value attached, right? That some items even create probably damage to it, yeah, damage to the product itself. So because it just requires maintenance or versioning or whatever, so there goes effort into it, but no clear value, no clear outcome in the end. Of course, we talk about outcome, output, differences, and so on and so on. And with backlog items, we also talk about vertical and horizontal slices. What's the difference? How user stories connect to that? Why it's good to have customer-centric view on that. The easy approach, like I know it when I see it, yeah, so that we need fast feedback on real stuff and not just on assumed stuff. Yeah, concept of user stories once again is in here. And also a little bit of what else they need to understand if they want to talk about estimation and so on. So, but that's already optional sometimes. Backlog refinement, we talk a lot because that's very important. We talk about problem and solution spaces, direct communication, face-to-face communication, additional practices which can come in handy, practices from design thinking maybe and so on. Sometimes I mention also advanced stuff if the group is really experienced, like story mapping, impact mapping, but only briefly because that's topic for other classes usually. We do also this exercise that people have to create some kind of user stories, so product backlog items, but we use this special format that we align, that we have the same concept in the class, and they need to present it and they get feedback on that. We also talk about the difference between acceptance criteria, if they are used, and definition of done, and the importance of a definition of done, of course. Leading us to story splitting, so product backlog item splitting. And I've taken one of the approaches here, one of the actually, yeah, I've taken a cheat sheet, not created by myself, but I've borrowed that. So how to approach splitting larger coarse-grained items into smaller ones, into fine-grained items. And we also talk about personas, how it helps to understand the clients, the users better, things like that. So that's covered in this second half day. And this is probably the most intense day of my class because there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of concepts. There's a lot of practices. There's a lot of principles, and also the connection to Scrum, of course, the connection to the values in the Agile Manifesto and things like that. So this is really, really, really a lot. And people need the afternoon and the night time to process that. So that's very good. That's, yeah, that's what they really require then. However, very important part of my classes, and it gives us much to continue with on the second day then in the morning. because this is really then the connection. And from there on, it's also a turning point a little bit again in my class, because it's not so much me explaining anymore. It's starting that we have much more interaction in between, because they start realizing what that means, and also they become more aware of that, what that means for their real life situation, and where there's a misalignment or even a dysfunction probably in their real life situation. So it becomes more tangible for them what I'm talking about, what we talk in the learning, what we have in the learning objectives. And that's why I say it's a turning point very often. So in the second day of my course, then yeah, that's where we continue with that a little bit and build on top of that. So it's my personal concept of incremental delivery of the class in that case. I'll explain that on the second day a little bit more then. Yeah, that's it. Second half day, after lunch, a lot to process, a lot of interaction again, a lot of exercises and theory combined, practice and theory. So yeah, that's the second half day of my job, of my class, sorry. See you.